fighting games are no stranger to having their franchises be spun off into different genres. Sometimes these spin-off games keep the original look and feel of these games. Sometimes they're a bit more out there, but still keep the characters and theming of the game. Some of them are just, well, plain old weird. So it's not uncommon for fighting games to have spin-offs in other genres. And a game that's a beat-em-up roguelike starring the Blazblue characters isn't something that I would consider too far out of left field. We're here to talk about the newest spin-off in the lineup, Blazblue Entropy Effect. Like I said, this is a roguelike beat-em-up game. The goal of the game is to get through 4 different stages and beat a boss at the end in order to win a run. Since it's a roguelike, the game plays out very similarly with every run. The differences between the runs are the characters that you pick, the abilities that you get, as well as some variations in bosses and arena type. There's a story that supposedly pushes things along, but we'll get on to that. Blazblue Entropy Effect is a strange game, and as a pretty new Blazblue fan, I have a lot of questions and things that I want to talk about for it. So, let's do that. Let's talk about Blazblue Entropy Effect. I want to start out with the game's strongest aspect, which I think, thankfully, is the gameplay. Blazblue Entropy Effect is split into 2 separate sections. There's the overworld section, where you play as this cute little guy, and then there's the actual roguelite section, where you play as one of the Blazblue characters. The overworld sections kind of suck, but they're not going to be what we're focusing on right now, since this is the area of the game that you'll be spending the least amount of time in. No, I want to focus on the actual roguelite section. When starting out a new run in Entropy Effect, you are able to select from one of 8 Blazblue characters. There are apparently plans to add more characters down the line. Currently, the characters are Ragnar, Noel, Hakumen, Lambda 11, Kokonoe, Hibiki, S, and Mai. There's a couple of characters that are reserved for bosses. For example, Arakune is a boss that can appear in some specific sections, and there's other characters that we'll get onto later that act as the final boss. I will say that currently, it feels like there's some mainstay Blazblue characters that are missing, notably Jin. Now, I'm not a Jin fan. I think he's kind of boring, but it is kind of weird seeing Ragnar here front and center, and Jin is nowhere to be seen. Also, the game doesn't even start you out on Ragnar. It starts you out on Hibiki, which is possibly the weirdest decision I've seen from this game. I get why they did it, since Ragnar's moveset in this game is considered not conventional, but Hibiki? Really? We don't have characters like Naoto, Jubei, Hazama, Tao, or Taiga in the game, but we get Hibiki. Fucking Hibiki! Hibiki! Sorry, I lost my cool there. Anyway, there are 2 types of way that you can directly improve your characters during a run, being tactics and potential. Tactics are the more regular and less impactful of the 2, being small boosts that you get to your character every time that you level up. These can be things like making your basic attacks inflict cold on your enemy, having your dashes leave a trail of fire behind you, summoning giant spinning blades every time that you get hit, or making it so that your healing potions are actually as effective as they say they are on the tin. Who brings healing items that don't heal them fully? Like, what were you planning to do? Sip it a little bit and be like, yes, I shall survive on 5 HP. The way that these small upgrades interact with each other leads to fun builds for your characters. Maybe you gain the ability to summon a ring of poison around you, and you have lots of effects that boost poison and venom damage, so you focus on spawning the ring of poison and watching your enemies melt away. Maybe you gain the ability to spawn tentacles from the ground, and focus on keeping your opponents in a specific area so the tentacles can hit multiple times. Maybe you just have so many upgrades that you literally nuke everything around you as soon as you see it. It all depends on what you get every time you level up. Obviously, because this is a roguelite, there are different powers of abilities that you can get when leveling up. You have white, blue, purple, yellow, and special red power-ups, which are power-up synergies depending on which tactics you already have. Rarer tactics have better stats than the lower counterparts, but there are some tactics that only appear at a certain level, or they get maxed out with one of the colors. For example, the tactic that makes it so that you get all of your HP back when you use a healing potion is maxed out at the blue tactic. At least, I think it is. I don't know what else they'd give you. As of writing and recording this audio, there isn't a dedicated wiki or resource center for the game, so I'm having to go off all of the information that I've learned. There is an official Discord, however, there isn't anything in there where I can easily find information, and, well, I'm too anxious to ask anything, so I'm gonna go back to lurking. Tactics are cool and all, but they're not exactly the most impactful thing in the game. You can't build an entire game just around small power-ups. You gotta add something more spicy to the mix. Give it a little bit of a kick, you know? Something to give your characters that real wow factor. Something like making it so that you gain more abilities and get more options. Oh, hey, that'll do. Potential is the second type of unlock that you get for your character, and they're much more impactful. After defeating a boss, finding a special room, or just getting lucky on the slot machine, big money, big money, big money, big money, fuck! You'll be rewarded with potential. These are permanent upgrades to your character that add more ways for you to use their kit. They can be simple things like giving you triple dashes or triple jumps, but most of the time they augment your build in some way to make you way more powerful. For example, Mai's combo normally looks like this. But with a potential, she's able to hold down an attack and get this really long multi-hitting attack instead. Not to mention that potentials interact in different ways, and the developers have actually created an in-game list of synergies for each character, along with the different things that they bring to the table. It's generally a good idea for you to get multiple synergies that work well with each other in order to get a more powerful version of your character that is able to do some crazy bullshit. Keeping with Mai, for example, I was able to get a synergy that allowed me to use a special attack during the big slash move that she has. This meant I was not only able to extend it even more than I already was able to, but I was able to do a bunch of damage and have a crazy easy way to cash out on my opponent. And this was like one of 3 things that I could do in the build thanks to the potentials that I got. In a normal run, you'll get a maximum of 7 potentials, since you get 1 from each boss that you fight before the final boss, and an extra 1 in each section of the game. It's a shame you get so few because potentials are actually really cool and easily the most fun part of the game. They all lead to crazy things that your characters are able to do and really just make you feel like a fucking badass. I know this is a roguelite, but your characters always start off feeling really weak, but then just after a few potentials, you feel on par, and once you get to 7, you feel nearly unstoppable. Hell, in some runs, you can get 1 potential and suddenly you feel like you're stronger than that area's enemies. It's annoying though, because on some runs, it feels like the progression is as it should be, as the enemies scale in difficulty with your character. And in other runs, you get 2 potentials back to back because you got lucky like I did. Potentials are easily the best bit of the game in my opinion, as they make your character feel like they're actually strong and powerful, which is what you want from a Blazblue game, right? But they trivialize most of the game once you get a few of them, and they're so infrequent that it's hard to really play around them. Like, yeah, it's a roguelite, but having a system where I could re-roll one of my synergies in a run, or even trade it with another one later down the line, would make me feel much better when I thought my build was going to go in one way, and then because of the roll of the dice, it went a completely different way. While we're at it, I'm sure that some of you are confused because I'm saying roguelite instead of roguelike. The game's a roguelike, Gecko. Use the correct sentence and stop being an idiot. And if that's what you're thinking right now, then you are a fool! Dumb idiot, stupid, dumb idiot, fool idiot, dumb idiot, fool! The game has the ability for you to power yourself up before a run in multiple ways. Before going into a run, you're able to unlock mind upgrades, which are a permanent upgrade to yourself. These can be things like having an extra healing potion, gaining the chance for more powerful tactics to spawn, more maximum HP, the ability to get an extra life so you can keep going after you die, and bonus currencies when you're starting out. And that's not even talking about one of the defining features of the game, having you use your previous runs to power yourself up. When you finish a run, you are given a rating score, and that run is saved in this grid. In your next run, you're able to choose 2 previous runs to power yourself up in this one. These runs take into account the character that you played, and depending on which you pick, you get different abilities related to those characters. You cannot pick the character that you are currently playing, so it's generally good to play multiple different characters, so you have a bunch of different effects to choose from. Speaking of the characters, we should probably go over what they're all like and what they all do. Hibiki is the character that you start with, and I have to say he's one of the more boring characters in the entire cast. Hibiki works similarly to how he does in BBCF, being a highly mobile character that is able to get in your face really easy. The difference here is he's able to take his mix-up potential and good punish game and turn them into a versatile all-rounder character who doesn't have a lot to say for himself. So like BBCF. He has a standard ground and air combo, a decent dodge that can be turned into a shadow clone that does damage, and a circle of shurikens for his skill. He's decent for you to get the hang of the game with, but I personally dropped him really quickly after unlocking more characters. Not much to say on him, unfortunately. Ragnar is a very brawly type character, who is able to use some of his health in order to do powerful attacks that will restore some of his own HP. The whole idea of Ragnar is waiting until you get low enough to use those powerful attacks to fill up more HP than what it costs to use them. His skill, and with certain potential, some of his normal moves, cost a percentage of his health, and if they hit the opponent, he will get back a flat amount of HP. So, if you use the moves while you're near full HP, you're basically just doing damage to yourself. But once you get to around half HP, the return generally either negates or beats the cost. As long as you hit it, obviously. I really like playing Ragnar in this game, but it does feel weird watching his combos after I got so familiar with the ones in Central Fiction. This isn't even like BB Tag, where they're pretending to do the combos. This is actually just not the same shit. Oh well, at least he still has his 5B. Noelle has been given actual guns and now has the ability to shoot people. I recommend hiding in the closest safe zone that you can, as she will kill everyone. Whenever she uses a basic attack, it travels all the way across to the end of the screen, meaning she's able to actually zone out her opponents with actual guns. I'm not a big fan of the keep away characters in any game, so I haven't spent a lot of time with Noelle, but I do think she's a fun spin on an Arsenal character. He gets the ability to use a bunch of different guns and weapons with the right potentials, so it's pretty cool once you finally get going. Hakumen is a slow, hard-hitting character who doesn't have a lot of combos to work with, but makes up for it by having a counter. He's able to use the opponent's strength against them in different ways, and through this he does a bunch of damage to them. A lot of his potentials revolve around adding parries to moves where they weren't before. So eventually, if you play him optimally, you'll become completely untouchable as you parry literally everything the opponent throws at you. A very nice spin on the character that keeps the core identity he had from Blazblue. Lambda 11 is a mid-range character who is able to summon a bunch of swords to hit her opponents. It's kind of strange that she's here instead of new, but I guess they wanted more of the rush-down hybrid moves. That, or they thought that green looked cooler. She's really not my kind of character, so I don't have a lot to say about her, but she makes you think about positioning, which is kind of cool, I guess. I don't know, I don't really care. Kokonoe uses her inventions to shoot. She's a bit of a weird character as she doesn't have a natural sprint and has to use her dodge to activate her run. It's all a bit weird, but she's an interesting character with some weird gimmicks up her sleeve and some setups depending on the potential that you get. I haven't spent a lot of time with her and she seems like one of the harder characters in the cast, but she's definitely quite quirky. S is easily one of the strongest characters in the game right now. She has the ability to summon sigils around her by successfully dodging and using her skill. With this, she's able to set up a bunch of damage on her opponent and leave them in absolute shambles. Not to mention, she has a potential that just lets her basic attack have multiple hits since they leave sigils behind. And it's just insanely broken. It does so much damage. Oh my god. I love this character, but she's busted. Please buff her even more. I want to break the game with her. Mai is able to hit her opponents lots of times and hit them hard. Having long-reaching basic attacks with lots of multi-hit tools like tornadoes, she's able to control the battlefield and leave her opponent in long-hitting combos. I know I haven't talked about their assists, but Mai's is easily one of the best in the game, leaving 2 giant tornadoes around an area that spin and crash together in the center, which is really good for crowd control. I literally play this character so I can have her assist on other characters. It's that good. And that is currently all of the characters in Blazblue Entropy effects. I know it wasn't a very long list, or a very in-detailed one, but a lot of the builds actually change depending on the potentials that you get, so if you think a character looks cool, maybe go and play them for yourself. Or watch someone else play them. They can all kind of go in different ways, but they all still stick to being the same character. For example, Ragnar can get a lot of moves that help with his lifesteal, or he could just get more moves that give him more special opportunities. It really depends on what you want to do as the player and what potentials you get. But how do you get new characters? After all, you only start out with Hibiki the fucker. Well, new characters are unlocked with a specific resource, which I can't remember the name of. Fuck it, it's called Blues Tokens now. You get these Blues Tokens by progressing bits of the story, aka beating runs, or by winning against challenge bosses. Now, the challenge bosses are actually kind of cool. You go against one of the bosses in the game that you would normally play as, but you play as a character from your previous runs. You keep all of the tactics and potentials that you had at the end of that run, as well as the assists that you brought in, and even carry over the healing potions if you died with some of them on you. If you beat the boss or die, you cannot choose that character again for another challenge boss. I would say that they're stronger versions of the normal bosses, but they're kind of just the normal bosses that you can fight in runs. Like, they're nothing special. They're cool and fun to fight against, but once you get to a decent rating level, you never really have much trouble beating them consistently. It is a nice gameplay loop though. Doing a run, going to fight a challenge boss, fight them, and if you win, you get to play a new character in your next run. Really nice flow. However, since the game is in early access, you'll cap yourself out on the amount of challenge bosses that you can do relatively quickly. There's one final mechanic that we need to talk about that affects your runs in different ways, and that is the entropy effect.
Holy shit, it's like the title of the game, no way!
When you enter a new room, you will gain an amount of entropy. You start at 0 and it can be raised to a max of 200 on normal mode and 300 on hard mode. While the entropy is below 100, nothing happens. However, between 100 and 200, there is a chance that you will gain effects when you next clear a room. You will always gain a positive and a negative effect. On normal mode, these last 5 rounds, and on hard mode, they last 10 rounds. The chance that you get these effects is based on the entropy level that you have, minus 100. So if you have 101 entropy, there is a 1% chance that after clearing a room, you will get those effects. Similarly, if you have 200 entropy, you have a 100% chance of getting those effects. We'll go on to what happens next once you're over 200 entropy in hard mode soon, but it actually has a lot to do with the difficulty of the game and is a mechanic that I really like. The effects that you get aren't as impactful as you may imagine. Some of the downsides can be kind of annoying, like random rockets showing up to hit you or enemies respawning after they die, but the upsides generally weigh them out, being things like more damage or even free health pickups if you do a combo. Having both positive and negatives come out make the entropy effects not as scary as you would originally think. Now, most of the stages are the same, with everything being themed around an environment. How many environments are there? When you clear a screen, you can go into something which I can only describe as the void, and pick which option you want to do next. There are a bunch of different ones, but there's nothing too crazy, apart from the gambling room. Come on, baby! Big money! Big money! Papa needs a new pair of shoes! However, once you pass the third stage and beat the small lost child, you gain access to a completely new type of gameplay. We're going to talk about some gameplay spoilers now, so if you would like to experience this section of the game for yourself, simply skip to this timestamp. Instead of having specific rooms, the Omega Escape lets you explore one massive map littered with enemies. There are a bunch of different things here, like shops, challenges, and most importantly, the final bosses of the game. It's really cool to have a completely different gameplay section, and even giving you a map which lets you teleport to different places you've been is really fun. It's honestly a bit of a shame that not more of the game was like this. Instead of having it so that your entropy increases with every room, the bar just naturally fills slowly over time. So you're constantly fighting against the clock in order to make sure you don't get too many downsides while trying to find the best route through the map. I would honestly prefer to have more stages like this than the standard beat-em-up stages. If the game keeps getting developed and they add longer runs, it would be cool to see an even bigger version of Omega Escape with more stuff to do in it. Unfortunately, the second to last boss isn't anything special, being these giant spinning shuriken things, but the final boss, also known as the ultimate boss, is Susanoo, and he absolutely fucks as a final boss. I will say that most of the game doesn't have anything to do with Blazblue as a whole, and we'll get onto that more in the story and art section. But having Susanoo as the final boss is not only genius, but he absolutely fucking slaps! He's able to use parries, not unlike Hakumen, but he has several full screen filling attacks that do a bunch of damage and could be really hard to deal with and dodge. He's so cool in this game! and it's nice that they were able to make him as badass as he is in the lore. It feels like I am actually fighting Susanoo. For the first time in this Blazblue game, I am fighting a Blazblue character, and it feels like it. I've only ever actually beaten this guy once on normal mode, and this is something that I have to massively critique about the game. When you finally beat Susanoo, the game just ends. Like, the default victory Blazblue splash art pops up for a second, and then you go back to the character ratings as if you lost. And that's it? It is extremely underwhelming, especially considering how hard the final boss fought. Speaking of difficulty, we should probably go through that. Roguelikes are always a really hard genre to balance, since the goal for most of the games is to find builds that just make the game shit itself. I'm not a big roguelike guy, if I'm honest. I've been known to go on some Risk of Rain 2 benders, but that's about it. I know enough about The Binding of Isaac to know that the main appeal of it is to break the game in half, though. Roguelites have the added challenge of keeping the game engaging all the time, while the player just inevitably scales in power. The best roguelites acknowledge this and give the players options to tailor the game difficulty to their liking, and offer them bonus rewards for beating the game with harder challenges. Entropy Effect says fuck it, and when you beat the game you get a hard mode that fixes some mechanics. Now, I haven't put a massive amount of time into this game. I'm barely clocking at the 8-hour mark, but considering the average run takes about 20 minutes, that's about 24-ish runs of the game. Considering some of that time was spent in menus, doing story stuff, and beating the challenge bosses, we'll round that down to about 20 runs. In those 20 runs, I have beaten normal mode, unlocked every character, gotten most of the achievements in the game, and had made it to the final area on hard mode with a character that I'm comfortable playing. Bearing in mind, this is all without all of the upgrade unlocks, and several of my more recent runs were with characters that I was less familiar with so I could get footage with them. I really don't want to be rude, but this game suffers from a difficulty problem, being the fact that it gets way too easy way too quickly. Normal mode becomes a joke once you have a few runs under your belt. After you unlock enough characters to have more than one assist, you'll probably get to the 3rd stage boss. If you can figure out a pattern, you might even get to the 4th stage on your first try. Apart from the final 2 bosses, they're all pretty easy to figure out and beat on normal mode, and you'll generally end up pumping out so much damage in the endgame that they won't even pose a threat to you. By my final runs, I basically felt like I was asleep at the wheel throughout the game, just killing everything in my sight before I got to the final boss, which actually posed a challenge. Also, entropy doesn't actually affect the game that much, at least not on normal mode. The fact that the buffs and debuff only last 5 rooms means that you never gain a massive amount of penalties, even if you have all 5 debuffs. In fact, I decided to test it out and did a run where I kept my entropy level at 200 for the entire run. And guess what? I managed to get to the final boss and got a ridiculously high rating score because of the sheer amount of XP I got from constantly fighting. Safe to say, normal stops being hard really quickly. But what about hard mode? Well, hard mode is better, but still suffers from a lot of the same problems. The entropy system now lets you go to 300, and the rooms now have an added mechanic of a timer in the top left. If the timer hits 0, you begin to take damage over time and need to clear the room before you die. When the entropy is above 200, the max amount of time that you have is reduced by a certain amount. This can actually fuck you up if you're not paying attention to it. And it even nearly got me killed one time because I wasn't pumping enough damage out. Thankfully, I had enough resources to survive the timer and keep going, but it made me actually think about my entropy level. The bosses are also all more powerful with new moves and more gimmicks, making them much more challenging to beat. The hard bosses are actually more fun than normal ones in my opinion, and provide an actual challenge even in the easier stages. The sandbug thing messes me up every time that I fight it on hard mode. But apart from that, hard mode is more of the same. All of the normal enemies seem to just have more health and deal more damage, but they can still be stun locked in combos really easily, meaning they're just more of a slog to get through. I'd be willing to bet that given more time, hard mode wouldn't be that hard either. I still have a bunch of upgrades to unlock, and you get higher rating scores when you play hard mode, so I imagine that my characters will just continue to scale indefinitely. It's a shame as well, because I like the gameplay, but without a good challenge apart from the end of the run, runs can become very monotonous and tedious very quickly. At least the game forces you to use multiple characters to keep your assist to a level that's actually usable, which is a nice touch. A lot of the time in games like this, I find one character that I like playing and then just never try any of the other characters in the cast. Now I have 3 that I switch between. The game's fun, but I'm already starting to feel the monotony after 8 hours. And for a roguelike game, that means that something isn't exactly working. The game is in early access, so the devs are still tweaking and updating the game. However, you can also pay for the game, so it's not really that good of an excuse. And with that slightly bombing note, that covers the gameplay section. And look, it only took over 20 minutes. I talked about all of that with barely any jokes or any insightful commentary. I have truly become what I fear the most. A YouTuber. So let's move on to one of the game's more weaker aspects, starting with the art direction. Now, I do have to say that the game looks very nice. A lot of the character sprites are ripped directly out of the Blazblue fighting games, with a few tweaks to them. Characters now have this light glow around the trims of their clothes to make them stand out in darker areas, and it looks very cool. I love the touch. The sprite work is still amazing, and the combos and attacks all look great. Not to mention, the voice lines are also ripped out of the old Blazblue games, so you're gonna be hearing familiar voices on all your characters. I also like the kind of neon style a lot of the intermission areas have. Places like the rest area just tickles my brain in a really nice way. I don't know what it is, but the really bright glow with all the sci-fi stuff is just, it's kind of cool. It's kind of a vibe, you know? I kind of like it. I do have to say, though, it is weird that not all of the characters are in their original sprite colors. Several of them have been put into an alternate color palette, despite using the BBCF splash art in the menus. For some characters like Mai, I can kind of get why they did this, because her tornadoes are pink, and they wanted to keep the theming of her sprite. But with someone like S, who already had a lot of blue in their design, to change her sprite is just weird. I don't know why they made this change, it just kind of bugs me. As for the enemy designs, while I think they all look good and animate very well, we're now going to go into why I titled this section Art Direction and not Graphics. Blazblue is a crazy game with a bunch of crazy lore to pull from. It's a world where magic and science live in harmony, and both can be studied and controlled. The lore is extensive and deep, with lots of stuff to pull from. But despite that, it really feels like a lot of the enemies just aren't Blazblue? Ignoring the lore for a second, aesthetically, Blazblue is an extremely anime style, with characters drawing from tropes all over the anime spectrum. But when you look at some of these enemies, they don't seem to fit in the general aesthetic of Blazblue. At least not the aesthetic that I'm used to seeing. We have bugs, soldiers, giant scorpions, dudes carrying massive tankers of dangerous liquids, and these weird diamond-shaped machines. The closest I would say that this game gets to an aesthetic that matches something in Blazblue is with the second to last stage. But even then, if you told me that this was a samurai from Blazblue, I wouldn't believe you. This is what a Blazblue samurai looks like. This is just a samurai. Blazblue does have a lot of high fantasy and high sci-fi elements in them, but its aesthetic is very different from what we see in Entropy Effect. Look at some of the stages in Blazblue Central Fiction. There's a wide array of places in the game, but a lot of the stages have a dark atmosphere around them. Stages like the Jewel Field are littered with giant rusted and decayed swords sticking out of the ground, almost making them look like tombstones that have been left for time. Blood scattered on the floor from the previous matches, with 2 giant displays at either side, allowing for spectators to see what is happening in the pit. Or this stage, the last train rail station. Giant spotlights illuminating the sky as your characters fight on the edge of a bridge with barely any banisters to protect them. You can see the buildings in the background are under construction with the old Gothic architecture piercing past it. The signs and the surrounding scaffolding are dirty and grimy, with torn sheets hanging over the city above. The text on the lights faded away over time. Even in the brighter stages, you can see this grime everywhere. Bascule, my favorite stage, has broken, dirty barrels and cracked pavements where the players are fighting. Hype Dog's house is barely standing as a group of people living under this towering mechanical bridge with a jagged city skyline behind them, looking more like an unholy conduit of metal than a city. Even in the clean places of Blazblue, there is this oppressive atmosphere. The cathedral has such a harsh contrast in its lighting, having the players fight in darkness most of the time, with an ominous statue looming above, watching their every move. Blazblue's world is dark and oppressive. It's a very aesthetically pleasing world, but it's not one that's nice to live in. Even the nicest looking areas have remnants of giant weapons and machinery littering them. The technology of Blazblue isn't sleek and almost invisible. It is present and looming. Giant cogwheels and metal arms are omnipresent all over the world. Major cities surrounded by machinery bigger than the buildings that are housing people inside of them. Some are well maintained and others look rough and rugged. Blazblue's aesthetic is very dark and gothic, with everything being cranked to the extreme. And this is what the main character of Entropy Effect looks like. Yeah. And this is what the skyline looks like. Yeah. There is a disconnect between the aesthetic of Blazblue and the world that these characters inhabit, and the aesthetic that Entropy Effect is very obviously striving to get. Entropy Effect seems to want to make it more of a cyber world. A lot of neon lights and high technology everywhere that doesn't have a lot of good explanation on how they actually work. Gone are the giant machines which tower over everyone, and here comes countless tiny robots that all function like sentient human beings. Even their design lacks the rugged aesthetics of Blazblue's world. The world isn't exactly clean, but when compared to the environments of the old Blazblue games, then it looks like the street sweeper has been working overtime. Some areas get close to matching the aesthetic that I'm used to seeing, especially some of the boss arenas, but others feel not quite right. Not to mention, all of the characters that you interact with look so out of place with the Blazblue branding. The hell is this dude doing here? Why do all the robots look cute? I like the way the Entropy Effect looks, but something about it isn't Blazblue. And the more that I look at it, the more that it irks me. What it does make is very nice. Like I said, I already really like some of the intermission rooms, but I just wish the combat environments and the overworld looked like they were actually from a Blazblue game, and they were actually in the world of Blazblue, you know? The story doesn't fare much better, if I'm honest. In fact, I think this is the worst part of the game. The story itself is fine, but it's told in a really, really bad way. When you beat a boss, there's a chance that you get a piece of a jigsaw puzzle. This will eventually form a full piece of a memory that has this weird mass of dust relay it to you. These are the cutscenes that tell the backstory of the game. Once you watch a cutscene, you go back out and have a conversation with the weird dust about what the hell that was. Ooh, mysterious. Then when you walk away from them, you're forced to stop, talk on the fucking phone, to say, hey, what did you learn? And, oh man, that's weird. I know a little bit about it, but I'm gonna be extremely vague. And then you might get stopped again for a different phone call. And you might also randomly get stopped while walking around, and they talk to you in extremely short sentences. You have choices on what to say to them, but they don't mean shit. And it's just annoying, okay? It's not a good way to tell a story. all of the story is told to you after the fact, and you're just kind of helping people around. You're sort of just solving drama for most of the game. I feel bad because I don't know what is going on, but the story is not that engaging or interesting. The actual Blazblue characters in the Blazblue game have nothing to do with the main story of the game. Instead, it's generally about two vague groups, which, I'm gonna be 100% honest, I can't even remember the name of either of them. But they don't like each other, and there's people working in the shadows and fucking other people over. I really don't know. From what I know, the groups mentioned in the game don't appear in any other Blazblue game. In fact, I don't think they appear in any other Blazblue media at all, and they're all completely original to this game. So that begs the question. Why is this a Blazblue game again? Apart from taking the characters, which in the overall world and story feel like they're literally being shoved into the game, there's nothing about this that screams Blazblue to me. The developers could have made a game where you work with the heroes of Blazblue to complete different missions in the actual world, and still kept the same gameplay and systems, but instead they made a game where basically an entirely different world exists for the game, and they're forcing the Blazblue characters to appear and do their dirty work. I'm okay with the game being about completely unique characters and having the Blazblue people show up for cameos or just the gameplay, but this just kinda sucks. I know because the game is a spin-off, it's gonna have some differences and isn't going to have a majorly impactful story. And that's fine. But if you're making a spin-off for a game series, you would at least want to draw inspiration from the series itself, you know? Blazblue Entropy Effect doesn't feel like a Blazblue game. It feels like a game someone else wanted to make and stole the Blazblue character assets. The only difference is this time the original developer gave them the funds up to actually do that. It feels like a game that is Blazblue in name only. So if we remove the Blazblue name, if we pretend that these are wholly unique characters with a wholly unique world, is the game actually any good? Is it fun? While I don't want to shit on the game any more than I have, I can't exactly say that the game is amazing as a full package. I would say that it's mostly fun when you're actually in the gameplay loop and doing runs, but everything around the game kinda drags. You could just ignore the story and focus on getting new characters and doing the fun part, but the game will still interrupt you every step of the way. It's not something that's majorly important overall, but it gives the entire game a stop-start feel to it, which makes it exhausting to play through at times. I just want to unlock another character, and I have to talk to a bunch of different NPCs on my way back to the actual run area. Apart from that though, the runs themselves are fun, but it's not something completely revolutionary to the roguelite genre. The game isn't pushing radically new ground for the genre and isn't showing what is possible in the gameplay systems. It's got a few unique things, but nothing that blows anything else out of the water. It's not going to be up there with the greats like Binding of Isaac, Risk of Rain 2, Hades, or Enter the Gungeon. It's unfortunately boiling down to just another cheap roguelite, but this time it has Blazblue characters. For Blazblue fans, it feels like a bit of a slap in the face. And for roguelite fans, I'm not 100% sure how much there is to keep them hooked. At just over £16, you could probably get your money's worth on this game, bearing in mind that it is more expensive than Enter the Gungeon, and just for a little bit more, you can get Hades or Risk of Rain 2, both of which I see as much better games. The game's still being updated, I hope the developers add more things to spice up the gameplay and find better ways to deal with the power curve of players. Because after only 8 hours in the game, I'm not feeling like I want to do another run. You know, being a Blazblue fan right now kinda sucks. The last fighting game we got was Blazblue Cross Tag Battle, a game many Blazblue fans don't like. And that was all the way back in 2018. The last mainline fighting game was released in 2015. It really feels like with the recent success of Guilty Gear, Arxis has no idea what they want to do with Blazblue anymore. And can you blame them? They basically reinvented what anime games could look like with Guilty Gear Xrd, and every 3D visual game they've made seemed to be a resounding success. In fact, the only 3D visual fighter that they've made that failed was DNF Duel, and I don't really know how much of that was Arc System Works' fault. And when your last non-type Moon Sprite fighter underperformed compared to everything else, and it just happened to have the Blazblue name slapped on it, what the hell do you do? I really want to be hopeful and say the Arxis are gonna give Blazblue the big shot that it deserves again. Now that everything's changed and the fighting game landscape is thriving, it would be the perfect time to try a new Blazblue. But I really don't know. It seems like Arxis really don't know what they want to do with their own game at this point. Yeah, they could make a new Blazblue fighting game, but they already have Guilty Gear and like 3 other projects in the works. The last one they made did terribly, so maybe it's time for something else. And thus they milk it for what it's worth, giving their brand off to smaller companies who haven't worked on massive titles before, hoping they'll make a successful game. It's depressing, but if you are a Blazblue fan, there's at least one good part. The old games haven't gone anywhere. Why not come over to my Twitch stream right now and relive those golden memories with me as we play BlazBlue Central Fiction together? I'm sure landing that Terumi combo will make you forget the pain for a little bit. BlazBlue Entropy Effect is fine. However, as a BlazBlue game, it is a depressing feeling, seeing something completely different wear the skin of a franchise you adore. BlazBlue Entropy Effect is a BlazBlue game in name only. And that's a damn shame. As always, a very special thanks to 64MHz, Almost Nap Time, Ben from Canada, Cervantes de Leon, Daniel Wiedericht, Fexo, Games.png, I Am Naoto, Jacko Reeves, King of Games, MP04, Ray W, Richmine, Sergeant Cubby, Super, Forcon, Tom Tanks, Voltage Charge, and Zandatsu for being Tier 2 patron supporters.